Well, he trails Joe Biden by 9 points in a new Monmouth University poll. If the election were held today, Biden would win 50% of voter support, up 2 points since last month. Trump would receive 41%, down 3. Biden's support includes 56% of women and a 20-point lead over President Trump, who sits at 36% among that demographic. Among men, Trump is up 2 points, 46% to 44.
So Willie, we've been seeing over the past several years rolling numbers that have surprised political analysts. First, women, suburban women, breaking away from Donald Trump quickly in 2017. A year ago, we started seeing polls showing that working class women also breaking against Donald Trump, making things, people that support him in the past. Now in this poll, Donald Trump is within the margin of error among men voters with Joe Biden. That gender gap among men is completely erased because of his poor leadership.
Yeah, as shocking as that number among women is, a 20-point spread, which would be fatal if it lasted through 6 months into Election Day. That's a stunning number. But the men number, that's where Donald Trump dominated, of course, Hillary Clinton. It's why he won. Casey Hunt, you look at those numbers, and again, it's a national poll, we should first say. This isn't how we conduct our elections, and it's 6 months out. Right. But Donald Trump has to know that his presentation every day up in those briefings and his performance as president, his trustworthiness, his unfavorability in this poll and others are all adding up to go with the economic numbers that he's trying to undo by sending people back to work, would spell doom if they lasted until November.
This gender gap, if it persists in this way, and if this is actually how voters are if people are still telling pollsters the truth, sometimes I talk to them and they suggest there are still people who are not willing to say that they support this president to pollsters. That was a phenomenon we saw in 2016. But this gender gap, is going to make, if it holds and turns out to be real, it's going to make 2018 pale in comparison to what this could look like in 2020. And let's recall, suburban women went out to the polls. They overwhelmingly sent a message back to Washington that they wanted a different style, a different kind of leadership from their leaders. And, we read a lot of, anecdotal stories and reports about how the coronavirus pandemic is falling disproportionately on women. And you see this a little bit in the polling as well when you look at how concerned and worried people are about how this impacts their lives. They're the ones, by and large, shouldering the burden of homeschooling their children. They're the ones who are, Lysoling the food when it comes in the door. They're the ones kind of thinking day in and day out about what does this mean for my family. That's not to say, obviously, that men aren't playing that role. Of course they are. But when you ask broad swaths of the public, a lot of women will say, look, this is falling on me. I am really worried about what is going on here. And I think that contributes and plays a role in setting up a dynamic that has already existed and really underscoring it. And if anything, making it worse for President Trump.
Yeah, and Jonathan Lemire, we've seen the numbers just collapse over the past month or so. They continue to collapse in just about every area nationally with swing states. We saw the FT poll, even among likely voters. People just don't trust Donald Trump anymore when it comes to handling this pandemic, the greatest crisis since World War II. What is the latest that you've heard from the campaign? I know that Donald Trump's very angry at Brad Parscale because he's made millions off of him and feels like Parscale hasn't done anything but gotten rich off of Donald Trump after they've spent millions and millions of dollars online, and Trump's numbers just keep collapsing. So blaming your campaign manager for getting rich off of you might make Donald Trump feel good, but it's not going to help him at all. After all, whether he likes it or not, the buck stops with Donald Trump. So what's the campaign saying now? What's the campaign thinking now? What's their next move? They're getting beaten by a guy in a basement.
That's what the president has said. And during his angry outburst at Brad Parscale that we reported a couple weeks back, he declared that he wouldn't lose to Joe Biden and made reference to the basement and mixed in some colorful language that I can't use here. But there's real alarm from the campaign about all of these polls on a couple different fronts. You guys just hit on one there, Casey and Willie and so on, with women. They know that women broke away from them significantly in 2017, 2018. There was going to be an effort to try to re-engage with women in the first months of this year. But the whole campaign has been, and their strategy has been scrambled by this pandemic. They wanted to spend the first few months trying to define Joe Biden, trying to use their significant financial advantage to do what the Obama folks did to Romney in the spring of 2012, sort of bludgeon him with ads and with a negative definition from which he would not be able to recover. That can't happen because of the pandemic. They were meant to be inroads with women that have now also been put on pause because of the pandemic. Other groups. There was a real effort from the Trump campaign. They were devoting a lot of resources to try to win some minority support, particularly among African American men. There was going to be a real push there. They thought that they could get even, if they could, the margins they expected would be so slim this November that if they could even win off a slice of that support of African American men, some Latino men away from Joe Biden, either to the Trump campaign or to get them to stay home, to think that there wasn't much of a difference between the candidates, that might be enough to tip some of these battleground states. But now we are seeing the brunt of the coronavirus falling on minorities. African Americans, Latinos have suffered disproportionately. So that's another thing that this campaign is struggling with as they try to reverse some of these polls. And they are very anxious about the economic numbers, the jobs numbers, the unemployment numbers coming out this week. That was going to be the president's best argument for re-election. That is now gone.
And remember, Mika, when African American leaders came in at the end of February to talk to Donald Trump about this, he said it's going to just go away. Don't worry about it. It will go away like magic. Now it's those African American leaders who have seen their communities ravaged by this pandemic that Donald Trump guaranteed them would magically go away.
Still ahead on Morning Joe, we're going to talk to former FDA Commissioner Dr. Scott Gottlieb. Also, live coverage of today's important jobs report as it crosses. Plus, you know the thing that the president does when he spends a week attacking a book that he doesn't like, only to help push it to the top of the bestsellers list?
Thank you, Mr. President.
Well, he's now doing the same thing to one of the most effective political ads in recent memory. We'll talk to one of the strategists behind that ad, Steve Schmidt. Straight ahead, you're watching Morning Joe. We'll be right back.
Thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.